Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. Watch, chop, retrofit.
Let's get ready to podcast! In the red corner, hailing from Watertown, South Dakota, by way of Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, wearing the rainbow sequin trunks, it's Chelsea the Regulator!
No!
And in the blue corner, hailing from Nichols by way of Florence, South Carolina, wearing the star-spangled trunks, it's Todd, the special guest.
Woo!
Let's get it on!
Glad to be here again.
Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. This is a movie podcast and pop culture adjacent podcast. Welcome to the show. Welcome, Chelsea. Welcome, Todd. Thank you for agreeing to do the episode. And if you hadn't guessed it, we're doing boxing movies today in honor of the upcoming Boxing Day holiday. And yes, we know that has nothing to do with boxing, but we figured it was a good reason as any to talk about boxing films. So thank you both for being here. We're going to have some fun today. First of all, we want to do an RIP to one of the listeners to the podcast. You might know her. Yes, Grandma Patty. Yes, Travis's grandmother passed away recently. And our thoughts and spirits and whatever else you might want to throw his way is with Travis and his family during this time. So we miss her. Just feel like we know her just from all of the stories that Travis has told us through the years. So rest in power, rest in peace to Grandma Patty.
And lots of love to Travis and Michelle.
And then, of course, timely to the episode, rest in peace to Mills Lane, famous boxing referee, dead at age 85. A lot of people who aren't familiar with boxing might know him as the voice of the referee in MTV's Celebrity Deathmatch TV series.
Fucking masterpiece of a show.
You might also know him as Judge Mills Lane on a TV judge show. But for boxing fans, he became famous as being the referee who disqualified Mike Tyson when he bit the ear off of Evander Holyfield during their second fight.
Yes, second fight.
So,
yep. I remember actually watching that fight at a friend's house, and we were so pissed off at the way that it ended. Of course, it's legendary now, probably even more so than the first fight, which was a better actual fight.
Right.
But at the time, I mean, it happened on, I can't remember the second or third round, so nothing had happened notable, and then all of a sudden the fight's over. You couldn't even see the bite initially. It wasn't until later that they showed a close-up of his ear, and you could see where Tyson had literally eaten part of his ear off. But, yeah, anyway.
It's part of our culture. It's part of our culture now. And
yeah,
R.I.P. to Mills Lane, because he definitely was part of that episode. So yeah, we're taping up. We're going toe-to-toe with the vast history of Hollywood heavyweights, boxing movies. Chelsea, what do you think about boxing movies?
I just haven't seen a lot of boxing movies. But the ones that I have seen, I don't know. I really sit on the fence with this. There's really problematic themes in a lot of them, obviously. And I guess you'll hear my opinions as we go, because I have a lot, but
we're gonna
it's not an easy answer.
We're gonna not ask Todd what his opinion is. We're just gonna let it show through the episode and see if you can guess what his opinion of boxing movies is.
This is inspired by a conversation we had.
Yes, absolutely. And
I'm here for a reason, folks.
A friend of the show, Jay Poole, has described Todd as a boxing Rain Man.
Yes, and that was brilliant.
So we are looking forward to knowledge bombs being dropped and right. The first boxing film was shot in 1894 by the Black Maria Studio, which was Thomas Edison's movie studio, the first movie studio. And it was a fixed position camera trained on a 10x10 ring, and it was a simulated boxing match fought between Mike Leonard and Jack Cushing. And there you go. That's our first boxing movie. It goes all the way back to 1894.
That's crazy.
Our first modern day boxing film, as most people would consider it, was 1931's The Champ. It's about Champ Purcell, the one-time champ brought down by the bottle.
Right.
And he tries to redeem himself in the eyes of his son.
Oozing with sentimentality.
Yes.
It's not a great... It doesn't hold up super well. It was on the Criterion channel a while back, so I saw it. It may still be on there. I want the champ is the lament that the little kid gives towards
it. Really lays the groundwork, though, for a lot of the... I don't want to say tropes, because they're just solid themes. They're solid humanist, fighting the odds and battling with your pride and your conscience. There are a lot of things
your
that
demons.
There's a lot of stuff that's in boxing films. We'll get into that in a second. Before we jump into it, though, came across an article that I wanted to share with you about some of the vernacular, some of the words that we use in our modern day language that come straight from boxing. And Chelsea, I want you to see if any of these ring a bell for you. Ring a bell. That's the first one. Bare knuckle. Obviously, bare knuckle brawl. Blow by blow, a detailed account. That comes straight from boxing. A blow by blow account is how you report on a boxing match in the papers. A newspaper, Chelsea, is a piece of paper with words printed on it. They were very popular.
Print?
Yeah, it's weird. Glass jaw referring to the.
Yeah, I know that one.
Okay, you've heard that one before. Okay.
Yep.
Down for the count. Somebody in my corner. Low blow. That was below the belt. You've heard all of those things. Obviously, a knockout, a KO, straight out of boxing.
Squared circle.
On the ropes.
What's squared circle?
A squared. So the ring is, of course, a rectangle, but they call it a squared circle. But I guess because I don't know. Why do they call it
I
a
would
squared
wager
circle?
that it has to do with the origins of boxing dating back to Olympic times in Greece. They probably did play in a face off in a ring, and since has become a squared circle.
Right.
Punch drunk. You've heard of the term punch drunk. You've heard of the movie Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah.
Which actually is probably what we would call now CTE.
Yes,
that's probably what we're seeing now with football players. Is probably what they used to call when they would you'd have a fighter who was old and washed up and slurring his words and that kind of thing. Saved
by the Bell.
Well, that's from a TV show,
right? Of course. I was waiting for you to get me with that one. Roll with the punches.
Yeah.
I mean, that's clearly straight off of boxing. Sucker punch. The gloves are off.
Right.
Throw in the towel. That's from boxing. That's when they said, my fighter's had enough. Manager throws in the towel to indicate that it's over. And then there's one last one. Is that the real McCoy? I did not know that the real McCoy came from boxing.
Really?
Norman Selby, or better known in the ring as Charles Kid McCoy, was a boxer in the 20s and 30s who had the reputation for being eccentric, outgoing, but also wildly unpredictable. This was even displayed in his outings in the boxing ring, when spectators and sports writers would wonder which version of the fighter would enter the ring and fight that night. The real fighter, or the guy just making a show of it? The real McCoy. And that's from the website titleboxing.com.
Interesting.
So yeah, I learned something this week.
Okay, I was really curious about this squared circle. And as I'm reading this, I'm going, well, of course, duh. So apparently when they first used to do like organized boxing, it was in like circles drawn on the ground. And then when they put like the ropes or the barriers up, it was still within a circle, and they called it a ring, which it's still called today.
Right.
Hence the squared circle.
It's really hard to make taut ropes
right.
curve and defy physics.
Right,
well,
right.
Yeah, and it just evolved from there. But yeah, because I was curious.
You need
that.
corners, I guess, to get it nice and taut.
Well, and to have someone in your corner, you'd obviously need a corner.
All right, let's dive in, folks. That was fun to talk about the words we use. So why has boxing been a film motif for so long? Todd?
Well, I think we sort of indicated that initially when we were talking about the champ. All kinds of, life themes can be encapsulated in a fighter and what the fighter has to go through in the ring. Fighting is a brutal sport. It's a working class sport. You don't hear about somebody that went to, nobody whose parents went to Harvard is a boxer, right? That just doesn't happen. It's usually working class people who are fighting their way up. They oftentimes have obstacles because the moneyed people are oftentimes trying to take advantage of them,
Right.
in these movies at least. And so they have those obstacles to come across, as we'll see in some movies. One, the harder they fall, that we may talk about in more depth. But there's towards the end of that movie, you find out about all this money that was made off of this fighter, and the fighter himself got $49.07. So you have these themes of the working class man trying to overcome obstacles, achieve a certain glory, because it's not just about the money, right? It's about proving something to someone or to a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, I just think that there's a lot of life that takes place metaphorically, in a boxing match, or within the life of a boxer.
Chelsea.
I think all of those things are true, except if you're a girl.
Okay, that's an excellent point.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally see exactly where you're coming from, and can see it in the few boxing movies that I've seen, obviously, but I can't find anything that feels really relatable to me in terms of struggle, because it is so centered around masculinity and how, like, even just the concept of that is challenged constantly.
Mm-hmm. I would even go so far as to say films like Girl Fight is nothing more than a male boxing story with a female character.
Well, exactly, and that's how all of those, like,
And
even Million Dollar
Baby kind
Right.
of falls into that trap as well.
I thought I was gonna love that. I'm like, oh yeah, look at this badass
I think Million
girl.
Dollar Baby does try to push back against that a little bit. I don't know how successfully it does it, but because you have, of course, the Clint Eastwood character who's kind of struggling to accept that this woman wants to fight, right?
And it becomes his struggle versus hers.
True. Yeah.
Again, turning it into a man's movie.
Exactly.
It is a very testosterone-driven genre, for sure.
Oh yeah.
The other flip side to that, in terms of those themes, for me, and the ones that I enjoy the most, are when you're dealing with the evil side of boxing, like you mentioned, the rich people pulling the strings, forcing the fighter between a rock and a hard place. It's usually a crisis of conscience. Very popular, well-known scene would be the tale of Butch in Pulp Fiction. A lot of people would relate to that who may or may not have seen other films. But there are plenty of other films that go back to the 30s and 40s that tread on those exact same themes. You've got a fighter who, for one reason or another, is being asked to take the fall. And it is a pride thing, as Marcellus Wallace always said. Fuck pride. That's pride talking. That's one of those themes that really resonate with me in boxing. I love those types of stories.
So the part where I still kind of enjoy watching the few boxing movies I've seen is boxing movies have this unique way, and I really don't mean this as a negative or a knock, but they kind of draw on sort of how soap operas work. Like, the shit gets crazy, like fucking crazy, no matter what movie you're watching, and that's really exciting. I really enjoy watching that.
And there usually is a good woman in the corner, particularly in the noir era boxing movies, of the men who are, in this, which has, as you say, a soap operatic flavor to it, for sure.
And that's really a compliment, not a knock at all.
I didn't take it that way at all.
Okay. Well, sometimes people you hear soap opera and you have a thought.
It's funny, Todd, you mentioned about the lower income or middle class fighters, and it's because at its core, boxing is a very inexpensive sport. You need your gloves.
Yeah.
You need your clothes, and that's about it. Everything else is kind of secondary. It's kind of like soccer in third world countries, where it's an inexpensive sport to get involved in, and you have this clear-cut path to glory. And that's very much what boxing represented in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And I guess, that raises that question of, what about today? Does the boxing movie still resonate with audiences? And I would say it does, because of those simple themes that it treads on. Those tales, the story of the underdog, the story of hope and overcoming obstacles. I think that still resonates with people. That's why you see that the Creed movie, which I think was very well done, kind of, even though while it was basically, a carbon copy of some of the films made before it, it still played. It played to a modern audience.
Well, and I think too, it's a very American thing too, because one thing I was curious about, it occurred to me as I was thinking about this episode, I was like, well, I haven't really seen that many foreign language boxing films, and so I started to look and see if I could find any, and there are very few. Certainly not any well-known ones. There's Rocco and His Brothers, which is an Italian neo-realism film. That's a really good movie, but I don't even really think of that as a boxing movie. One of the brothers is a boxer played by the famous French actor Delon. But in any case, that made me think, well, why is that very much an American cinematic thing? And I think it does have to do with that sort of rugged individualism that seems to permeate in the sort of American self-image. And so you mentioned soccer. It's a poor man's sport, but in soccer you can be a great soccer player but be trapped on a crappy team. Whereas if you're a boxer, theoretically speaking, it's your own grit and toughness that, you know, you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps, so to speak.
Which is a very American thing. And
Right.
to me, I associate boxing really closely with the military, just because those are movies that stick out in my mind in terms of how I've seen it. And just, well, also being in the military, you definitely hear, even just within boot camp, about the rich history and all boxing has within the Navy itself.
Right.
It was a big deal.
And that's a great point, and it still exists today in the branches of the military, correct? I mean,
I don't know, but again, just past history stuff, that was really a big aspect of things we were taught.
For sure.
I can think of a dozen films where the main character is like, oh, he was a boxing champ in the army back in World War II.
Well, yeah,
Absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely.
It's a big deal. To your point about the foreign films, like boxing films, non-existent, I was also doing research for this episode and came across an article about how South Africa just within 2020 released a boxing feature film called Knuckle City. And it was kind of a big deal. It has lots of articles.
Right. I found one that I think was Turkish. There are very few out there,
Yeah.
though. And it's weird because it's not like American football where it's only played here for the most part, or popular here. Boxing's popular all over the world, and yet you don't have that many movies. And I do think it must say something to the American sort of ideal. Although in the best movies, though, it challenges that. Of course, you have these the rugged individualism of the boxer. We're going to wrap that down from the mobster surrounding them, or whoever the powers that be are.
Well, I think another kind of problem where it doesn't translate everywhere, and kind of a problem for me, and one of the things I was telling you as I was watching Rocky, why the fuck are these types of sports still considered sports? What the fuck is the point of just trying to hurt somebody else? And I think just globally there's enough reasons that people hate each other to do it as a sport and to be celebrated and for fun. I'm not entirely sure that translates.
I mean, this dates back to the Romans. I mean, one man fighting another man, that's as primal as it gets.
But in modern times, just with everything going on, I don't get it.
Yeah.
At all.
well, I think that in reality, boxers probably have a great mutual respect and admiration for each other.
Of course, but I just struggle to see the sport within it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's, they call it the sweet science. That's another term that comes from boxing. It was coined by a sports writer, A.J. Liebling, back in the 40s, I believe. But anyway, his argument was that there is art to it. There's when you watch a particularly good, talented fighter who's good at his craft, it's no different than watching a welder or someone like that going at their craft. They have there's an art to it. Joyce Carol Oates, she wrote a boxing book as well. I think National Book Award winning author, I guess. Anyway, but a lot of journalists, writers have written eloquently about what they see, at least, as sort of a beauty behind the brutality. Now, that doesn't mean that's right, but
yeah, and I can see all of those things. It's just, like I said, in this day and age, to train and to make strategies just to ultimately at the end hurt somebody else really is a hard pill for me to swallow. That's all.
it's understandable.
And I'm sure that is shared by a lot of people. you're not going to get an argument out of me in that regard. But it does raise an interesting point about other people's opinions and
we don't care.
and what the public craves and thirsts for, and that brings me to my point about the rise of UFC MMA type fights versus boxing. And I think that you cannot dispute the popularity of MMA. And I mean, you see, it seems like there's a pay-per-view on every other week. And obviously it's doing well, raking money in hand over fist, and in the women's and the men's side for that matter. But has that popularity made boxing movies less impactful to audiences?
Well, here's where I think the downfall is going to happen. It's these fucking little TikTokers and YouTubers that are having these fights against each other, or fighting somebody who was within the boxing world who it's not an even match, but it's to get their names out there. And ultimately, a lot of them want to end up in MMA. And MMA is like, fuck you, you're turning this into a joke. And I can kind of see how it's all going to crumble here pretty soon, because it is pretty fucking, I mean, it's a joke at this point.
One theory that I have about why, we were talking about this before the show. Even though MMA seems to have passed boxing in popularity, nevertheless, if you think about how many MMA themed movies are there, I can't even remember the name of it. I can think of at least one or two, but none that were really got much notice. Yet there have been boxing movies continue to be released featuring prominent actors like Southpaw with Jake Gyllenhaal. You have, of course, the Creed franchise that you referenced earlier. They're making a third one of those. They're doing really well. One theory I have, I think, speaks, though, to what Chelsea said about TikTok and that sort of thing. The people who are into MMA are younger people, and they're more in, like, 2.5 hour movies aren't their bag. Right?
No, they want it quick.
Right. And so I wonder if, I mean, that's just a theory, but I wonder if that is why you're not seeing like a bunch of MMA movies suddenly coming out to tap into that market. Maybe that market's not really there in terms of an interest in movies. Maybe it really is just on like the social media, TikTok, whatever type
as you were saying
platform.
that, and we really, like, at the beginning, talking about how boxing really is an American, themed thing. MMA draws from a lot of different things. I mean, like, you have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, like all these things.
Oh, that's a great point.
I don't think you can have the American dream, the underdog, all of these things with so many different elements that go into MMA. You just can't have it.
And that's a great point. Even though obviously Americans didn't invent boxing, the modern concept of having a world champion that was recognized, that started with the New York Boxing Commission in the early 20th century, and all the early champions were Americans. Primo Carnera, in fact, the one Italian boxer I mentioned earlier, was the first foreign champion. And so even though boxing obviously goes back thousands of years,
of course,
the modern conception of it really is sort of American made.
And it's the thing that plays well within movies and makes them so successful. And I just don't think that you can do it with MMA. You just can't.
Yeah. Maybe, it may have more, like the international flavor of it may actually work against it in terms of its cinematic appeal, at least in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that remains to be seen. We'll see if there's like a fall off. There has to be some sort of point of diminishing returns if boxing movies stop appealing to an audience, then they'll stop making them. I mean, it's just the way the business works.
Right.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, is it a matter of the attention span of the MMA enthusiast versus the feature length of a film? I like to think that there is a place for boxing films just because of the very simple parables that they tell.
Right.
But at the same time,
I think you can do it
there
without boxing.
You can do it in other ways, exactly.
And the fact that, MMA too is more complex in terms of you're throwing kicks, you're doing all the choke holds, all this stuff. Boxing is just your fist and that's it.
It's
and
very
there's something about that
simple
simplicity,
And that kind of gets us really close to the next topic. I think that there's something about boxing that does work on film, and that is it's a very simple thing to follow. Punches thrown, punches received.
Exactly.
You can do some beautiful things with camera work to really make those punches impactful if they need to be or not. And
well, and then from the practical standpoint of the actors, so you have to train the actors to produce a facsimile of being a good boxer or a good MMA fighter. It's probably easier to do that for boxing where it's just your fist versus trying to create some facsimile of a really good MMA fighter who has to,
know so many different things.
Yeah.
It just
And
doesn't
the MMA
translate.
fights aren't that cinematic. A lot of those fights end
No.
up with
Clutching, grabbing,
they're on the
It
ground
really
grappling.
comes into like wrestling and not like WWE wrestling,
Yeah.
obviously. But
Yeah. So some of that was just kind of popping into my head. as we
yeah,
were talking.
same.
well, then let's spend the last bit of the first half then talking about some of our favorite boxing films.
Well, wait, I have a question.
Oh, go.
Have you ever boxed? Have you ever been like in a fight where it
Yeah.
came? Tell me about it.
I grew up boxing. I've told you this story before.
I want to hear.
I grew up boxing. My dad had got me boxing gloves, and he would put on knee pads, and he would stand on his knees, and we would box each other. I was between 6 and 8 years old when I was doing it the most. I remember my dad had a speed bag and a body bag, and we had a carport, not a garage, just an awning, and he had a body bag that he would work, and so he would get on his knees and we would fight. And there's a home movie of mine that my mom shot where I clocked my dad on the jaw, and it was so unexpected. You could see that like his lights go out for a second, and then he kind of like shakes his head back into realization that, damn, But that's about as far as I took it. But I did watch a lot of boxing growing up. And most of that was from my grandfather. My grandfather watched, on my mom's side, watched a lot of the HBO Friday Night Fights. HBO was a huge producer of boxing. And so I grew up in the era of the tail end of Muhammad Ali, the rise of Sugar Ray Leonard, the Leon Spinks, those guys. And then, of course, the game changer for me when I was around high school was, Mike Tyson. Mm-hmm. That guy completely changed the game entirely.
Who was the guy I was telling you about? Oh, famous, but after Mike Tyson.
You got Oscar De La Hoya. You have,
that one. That's
De La
it. There you
Hoya,
go.
right. And De La Hoya actually fits in with my timeline.
Mine too.
Of course, I remember Tyson, and I mentioned I saw the Bite fight live when it happened and that kind of thing. But I lived out in the country where we had like 3 channels, so I wasn't seeing a lot of the ESPN, HBO stuff. Maybe a friend would have it occasionally. It was when I moved into town and we had cable. Then I started kind of getting into it a little bit more, and that was the era of De La Hoya, Pernell Whitaker, Sweet Pea as they called him, Felix Trinidad. I'm trying to think of somebody who might be more recognized. Lennox Lewis was the world heavyweight champion from Canada. Actually, that was kind of the era that I got into it a lot, and that was probably the last era where boxing was like king.
It feels like it died after that because I was still pretty young when that happened, but I remember those HBO like Friday night fight. Like that was something that we watched all the time. And then as I got older, it just wasn't there. Like it was just gone.
And HBO closed up shop with their boxing about 3 or 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Up until then, that was one of their staples. And they had the same announcers for a long time. Jim Lampley is considered one of the great boxing announcers.
It wasn't pushed as hard though. Like after like 2000, honestly.
No, and I think that's why HBO eventually did away with it. I guess it just wasn't giving them the return because, they're trying to get subscribers, right? And so you get the subscriber through, we've got Mike Tyson on, we've got Oscar De La Hoya on, we've got, whoever on, and the names just started drying up. Floyd Mayweather's probably the last big name.
Yeah, and then the advent of pay-per-view, I think, really was
that hurt.
Was a definitely spike in the coffin.
Yeah.
Did you ever actually like box? Do you have like a boxing story?
Oh no. Well, sort of. My friend Stan Watford, if you're listening, shout out. You're not, but when his dad had boxing gloves in his garage, and so Stan and I would get on his trampoline and put the boxing gloves on and kind of hit the crap out of each other with that. But that's my extent of my boxing career. So
All right.
What about you, Chelsea?
Oh well, I did Muay Thai. I didn't box, but
You've taken a punch.
I have.
okay.
I was like pretty fresh out of boot camp, like maybe 6 months, and I had gone back to South Dakota to visit my family. And there's like this local bar there, and you play pool, and one of the tropes is they give you peanuts and you throw all the shells on the ground, and it's just that kind of place. These Marines had walked in, and they were from a bigger town, but like visiting family or something, and they were like, "Oh, let's play pool." I'm a terrible fucking pool player, like the worst. We were like loser buys a round. So they had their back turns, and they were talking, and I pushed mine and my cousin's balls in. But I had went and got beers. They turned around and like kind of caught me, and the one guy was so pissed. Oh my God, he was freaking out, screaming and yelling. And the next thing I know, he just clocks me, and I was fucking knocked out. And it was awful. But all of my uncles and cousins were there. Anyways, I didn't give the fucker the beer that I bought him.
Oh my God! Well, I think with that's a good pausing point for us to stop and get some intermission snacks and treats and
right.
All that kind
I'm
of
not
business.
singing the song.
You're not gonna sing?
No, I don't sing the song.
Damn it! Nobody likes to sing the song
Well,
anymore.
I still feel some type of way about the sound of my voice.
Okay,
so.
well, let's go to the lobby and get ourselves some
Get ourselves a treat.
boxed lunches.
Wow, fucking weak. I'm glad I didn't sing the song.
Welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us. I had to pee in the yard.
I didn't, but I also didn't get punched.
Todd had to pee in the yard.
Indeed.
We've refilled our beverages and kind of have an on-theme beer. I'm drinking official hazy IPA from Bell's Brewing. Get it, Bell's?
Yeah, I got it.
Ring the
Thanks.
bell.
Nice.
Ding ding, which is the way one of the is it Rocky 2 that ends that way? Ring the bell. Ding ding.
Actually, that's Rocky
God.
3.
Rocky
That's
3,
right. It's
when,
Rocky
Oh
3.
my God.
And they
Bit
do
more
the
to that.
freeze frame and it turns into like a painting.
Oh my
Right.
God.
Oh, Jesus. Well, that's a good segue into talking about some of our favorite and not so favorite boxing films. Todd, I'm going to let you go first. You're the guest.
Well, I'm
Lead
going to
us
save Rocky since we're going to be talking about that. That's definitely on the list, of course. One that I'm a big fan of that I rewatched this week, and you and I sort of texted a little bit about, The Harder They Fall with Humphrey Bogart, which was, in fact, his final film role.
Yes.
This film was made in 1956, released in 1956. He died in January of 57.
Oh, wow.
So it was the very last movie he did. He seems fine in his performance in this. He's smoking a lot of cigarettes, though, so, probably didn't help. But,
Weren't they all, though?
yeah, exactly. So in any case, this movie it's still got that sort of crooked gangster type angle, but it's much different. It's more from the promoter side rather from somebody's, in most of these movies, there's a mob element, something like that. It's not quite like that in this movie. Bogart plays a sports writer who's down on his luck. The paper that he wrote for has folded, and so he's out of work now, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. He's married. He has a wife. This promoter is trying to bring him on as sort of a press agent, essentially. And what he wants him to do as the press agent is build up this giant man he's from Argentina, called Toro Marino. And
he's a big man.
Yeah. Oh, he's huge, massive.
You can't understate how big and massive this dude is on the film.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not Andre the Giant big, but he is a big fella.
Okay.
And the actor who played this guy, by the way, and I forget his actual name, but he was actually, so the Toro character was found in a circus. That actor was also originated in circuses, and then was eventually a professional wrestler. You could see why, though, someone would want to take this guy and turn him into an attraction, a popular fighter. But in any case, this promoter brings in the Humphrey Bogart character, Eddie, because he is a very well-respected sports writer, and so he wants him to work for them so he can sell that this guy is the real deal. So Eddie, they bring in Toro to see him fight, and he is horrible. He cannot take a punch. He cannot throw a punch. He is awful. They have the trainer fight with him, and the trainer, by the way, is played by Jersey Joe Walcott, who was a former world heavyweight champion. But in any case, the trainer punches him in the stomach, and Toro falls over, has to be held up. He punches him in the face, and it's made to look like just a regular old punch, falls over again. And so in any case, Toro is just terrible, can't fight. And so Bogart is like, no, get me out of here. But He's talked into it, though. This is where sort of the dark side comes in. It's not with the fighter in this movie, which is where it's a little bit different. Or at least the fighter finds out later. But for most of the movie, the crisis is not with the fighter. It is with the Bogart sports writer character. So you're looking at a peripheral character and so that's where that movie, I think, is a little bit original.
Yeah.
It's not the fighter himself.
Yeah, it's Bogart.
It's this peripheral character who's participating.
And he's wrestling
in this
with his
ruse.
ethics.
Right.
Is this been remade? This sounds familiar.
I'm sure that it has in maybe not necessarily in boxing.
Not like, well, but not straight remake, but
like a press agent trying to sell a package that's not true.
The Toro character is what's getting me, because I'm like, I think this sounds really familiar.
There very well could be. I'm sure it was some premise in some other movie that was similar to it, but yeah. But yeah, so, and you find out too through conversations that the Bogart Eddie has with other colleagues of his that this is commonplace for sports writers at this time to kind of do this sort of thing where they, in order to get ahead or not to be pushed aside, that they, when they know a fight's fixed, they don't tell it, that kind of thing.
I'm going to jump in with one of my favorites, and it's a new favorite. We just discovered it this week, Todd, you and I did, but hopefully it's going to set up the next one. I hope you'll take my cue on that one. I'm going to talk about Body and Soul. Body and Soul
Really
is a really cool movie. It stars John Garfield playing a boxer who kind of works his way up through the ranks, becomes the heavyweight champion. He's got a battle axe of a mother. Oh my God, yes. She's hard, she's mean, but it's good. It works. It works for the story.
Exactly.
He's got a love interest who is devoted to him. You're talking about the woman in the corner. You know, she is virtuous, and she's his Jiminy Cricket. She's his guiding conscience.
She even has a bit of an accent that they comment on the movie. We're not.
Right.
What was I don't think it was exactly a British accent.
No, but
they actually make a joke about it.
Yeah, she had like a not a well-to-do upbringing, but she was around well-to-do people or something.
Right.
But John Garfield ends up being the champ, and then he's supposed to take the fall. He's got to take the dive. And everyone's betting on him, or the people who are in the know are betting against him.
Well, the interesting thing about this, though, is before we get to the end where he's supposed to take the fall, he actually agreed, and this is another thing that I think is interesting about this movie, he agreed, he can't get him, he figures out after several years, I'm not going to get a title shot unless I go in with these mobsters.
Right.
And so he finally agrees to it. His friend, who's great in this movie, Shorty. I don't know who the actor is, but you remember Shorty.
Yeah, Shorty was fantastic.
Shorty's completely against it. He doesn't want him to go in on it. But the what was the John Garfield character name? Do you recall?
I can't remember.
In any case, but he's so his ambition drives him to, you know what? Fine, I'm going to go in with these guys and do business with them, and then it all culminates in what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's really one of those the devil you know kind of situations where he knows what he's getting himself into, and he's going to bet against himself as well so he can get a big payday. And so it shows you a lot of the seedy, darker side of boxing when it comes to the gambling of it. There is a character involved where an African American man who is a boxer who gets clocked and becomes punch drunk.
Right.
He clearly and I don't know if the poor fella he's kind of wall-eyed and so it kind of really plays into that he's not right, and so he's got this one left eye that shoots out the other way, and he is a man of principle, right. And he helps John see the light, and ultimately passes away in the ring. And he has this rambling thing where he's just raving mad practically. They're like, just let him tire himself out, and he collapses and he dies. And that's that's the turn where John's like, maybe I need to just see this through to the end and take it all 15 rounds, and. It's a cool movie. I'd never heard of this before, but it was #1 on Pace.com's list of top boxing movies, and gave it a shot, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And it hopefully I'm gonna let you talk about the next one then, because it reminded me of.
Well, wait, I have a question, and it might be a dumb question, but is there a movie about Don King and all of his fucking antics?
There actually is. I have not seen it. I can't recall. And as I was researching movies, it popped up. I don't know how well regarded it is, and I can't recall the name of it, but yes,
That's
is.
Only in
there is-
America.
It might,
That's a
that might
fucking
that might have been the
interesting
That's probably
name.
what it's called.
That's probably what it's called. Yeah.
Todd, I hope you'll talk about the setup.
Oh yes,
Because you saw it more recently than I did.
Right. So the setup, actually, this was one that I was texted about this week, and I was like, oh, yeah, that one. And I may have seen it before. As I started watching it, it became familiar. But this movie is an editing masterclass.
Yes.
I mean, it is lean and mean and right to the point.
80 minutes?
Right, and it's Robert Wise, right, the director,
Yeah.
Who's a well-known director of noir films. Yeah, I mean, less than 80 minutes. I think it was 73 or something like that. And the last half of it is the fight,
Yeah.
which was kind of cool. But the cool thing about that fight scene and what you see is that Wise doesn't just focus on the fight. He makes the crowd a character.
Yes.
He keeps focusing in on different members of the character. He keeps focusing in on this like 50, 60-year-old woman who's like bloodlusting, like,
Yeah.
kill him, you know.
Yep.
This kind of thing. This fat guy who's just like scarfing hot dogs and stuff, they keep coming back to him. They keep going back to this guy that's bet money on the fight. Can't remember what his name was. He had a colorful name, as they tend to do.
This is one of my favorite boxing movies. I love this movie, and my review on Twitter was Tarantino had to have seen this movie.
Oh, okay,
when
I remember
he wrote
you.
the Butch part.
Well, and
for
that's
Pulp
why
Fiction.
I sent you a link to from BoxingScene.com, Tarantino's 5 movies that he mentioned. He didn't mention
this one, but
and I was very surprised.
It's so similar, and it fits in with the Pulp Fiction body, the pool which he draws his inspiration from that film.
Right.
So I thought that he had to have seen it.
He probably did. Again, the economy of this movie, though, the plot actually is not. It's the familiar boxing plot, right? You have a fighter. He's sent into a fight. He's supposed to throw it, although he doesn't know it initially. His trainer wants to pocket all the. If they let him in on the fix, they have to give him money, and so his trainer's like, well, he's going to lose to this guy anyway, so we're just not going to let him in on it. And the spit man, by the way, is the guy that holds the bucket or the cup. Sometimes they call him the cup man, sometimes the spit man. But the guy that they spit, they have a bucket and they spit spit their water into and that kind of thing.
Okay.
They don't really do that in modern boxing, but in the old fights, they hold up a bucket to him and they spit into it. Anyway, he's like, you got to tell him. And they don't want to tell him, though, because they don't want to cut him in. Finally, in the last round, he's actually starting to win the fight and land some blows. And they're like, all right, you got to tell him. They tell him, and he goes in, wins the fight. And then it's interesting, though, they don't end it in glory. The mob guys come after him because he was supposed to lose the fight, even though he wasn't told until the last second. And they kick the shit out of him at the end of that movie.
You know, it just occurred to me another great boxing movie, but it's not a boxing movie, and nor is it really boxing. It's more bare knuckle brawling. Is Snatch.
Right.
The fucking boxing scene in that is tremendous.
Yeah.
And that you talk about somebody not getting the memo about fixing the fight and having to hightail it out of there. That's fucking great.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I guess the peripheral of boxing, like that kind of shit, is sort of what interests me. But there's a glamour around boxing, like in terms of the crowd. Is there like a movie kind of about that?
I don't know, but it's funny you mentioned the glamour. That's something I meant to mention earlier. I think in my outlandish intro, the pageantry of boxing, the robes, the very
no,
loud.
I just
shorts.
mean even
but,
like the
but
crowd.
the crowd,
like
it is.
It's a fucking
Yes, it is a big deal. Or at least it was at one point.
And this is something that doesn't really exist anymore, even in modern boxing. So the main boxers today fight twice a year, and that's about it, at most. Back in the era that we're talking about, that The Harder They Fall came out, that the setup came out, guys would fight twice a month.
Yeah.
Even major fighters. When I watched Raging Bull, Jake LaMotta, this is in the 1950s when he's having his famous series of matches with Sugar Ray Robinson, who's considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. They fought twice in 3 weeks.
oh wow. Okay.
And so this is not something that's done these days. And I bring that up because that does have to do with the crowd. Going to a fight in certain cities was a lifestyle.
Oh, in New York, absolutely. Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, and I mean even like Vegas, like there's that was something that appealed to me, especially as like a little girl. Like the pretty dresses, the furs, the jewels.
Furs, exactly.
Oh my god!
I mean, that is like if I had to draw a cartoon of a woman attending a boxing match, even though today that's verboten, it would be a woman in a mink stole. I mean, that's very much the image that you conjure up when you think of a classic boxing outing, where you've got these people in the crowd who are, if they're not well-to-do, they sure as fuck want you to think they're well-to-do.
Exactly.
Well, and the setup and that's one thing that's so great about the setup is that it captures that element. You have the main plot, but then they make it a point. They show all these people in the crowd who are regulars.
Yeah.
These are people that go to the fights all the time. Oh, one character there, too, I almost forgot about, was the blind guy who has his, I don't know if it was his buddy or whatever, describing to him what's going on in the fight, which was kind of neat.
Fucking brilliant.
It's a great movie.
The other top in my list, I mean, we're going to talk about Rocky in a second, yes. But out of the films I've seen, I think Raging Bull is one of the greatest boxing movies and possibly one of the best movies ever made. What Scorsese does with boxing and filming and just turning it into theater, it is beautiful.
And the interesting thing is that Scorsese was not a boxing fan and initially had no interest to do it. De Niro was the one who wanted to make the movie.
Yeah.
And he kept having to hound Scorsese to get him to do it. And it was coming out of Scorsese's stay in rehab for cocaine addiction that he made the movie. And Scorsese actually thought this might be his last movie.
What year was this?
80. I
So
think
this
they're
is
81.
So this is post Taxi Driver.
Yes.
The cool thing about Raging Bull is that it's kind of it's a tough watch. It's not the rise of the underdog so much as it is the fall of the champion.
It's an anti-hero movie.
Yeah, it's Jake LaMotta and his horrible self and just the decline.
And this is a real boxer that we're talking. Like somebody.
yeah.
This
No,
is
Jake
based on
LaMotta
somebody.
was this is someone my grandfather watched on television and
All right.
that kind of thing. Yeah, he was a real guy. Was the middleweight champion.
In the interest of time, any other top boxing flicks? I think you mentioned Fat City to me.
Oh, Fat City by John Huston is a really good one. It's kind of a neo-noir more so, and it doesn't really have that element that the movies immediately preceding it have, because this Fat City came out in the early 70s.
Yeah.
This is about guys who never were and are never going to be. They're not going up the ladder. They're not. I mean, Stacy Keach is the protagonist. Jeff Bridges plays an early role. You think initially that Jeff Bridges may be the up-and-comer, but then he kind of fades away. This is about what boxing is like for most of the guys that go into boxing.
Yep.
It's not an uplifting.
Nope.
Oh, look, this guy's rising to the top.
Typical for early 70s cinema.
Yeah.
Very cynical. Chelsea, you were going to say something?
I just want to give a call back to this one time where during pandemic times we got experimental with the podcast and the watch parties, and we went to Walmart and did the bin thing where what was that stupid?
Jungle Land.
That fucking movie was terrible.
That's funny. I saw it show up on a list. Somebody's like, the best boxing movies.
Oh my god.
I think it's pedestrian at best.
The fun part about that movie was going to Walmart and filming you pick out the shit in the box.
Remember that Nick Cage movie Snake Eyes?
Yeah. Have you seen Requiem for a Heavyweight?
I have.
Anthony Quinn?
Yes. So this was, and what got me interested in it is I'm a nerd for the Twilight Zone original series, which Rod Serling wrote. And Rod Serling wrote the original, wrote the screenplay for this. It was actually originally written as a teleplay for a show called Playhouse 90, which was on early television. And Jack Palance actually played the Anthony Quinn role in that version. And you can find that on YouTube, I think. That one's an interesting one. It's actually not so much a boxing movie, despite the title. The Anthony Quinn character is at the end of his ropes. He's trying to he at the beginning of the movie he's trying to get a job as a counselor for kids, and then his former manager has these debts, gets him drunk, and he blows the interview and ends up talking the Anthony Quinn character into doing like a professional wrestling thing. Using his boxing celebrity in order to help him get out of debt. It's a really good movie. I didn't bring it up just because there's not a ton of boxing in it, despite what the title is.
Okay.
But, and there are several, like you mentioned Pulp Fiction. I wondered about mentioning that as a boxing movie, but there's little bit of boxing, but
There's a lot of other shit going on.
yeah, there are a number of movies like that.
What are your? Let's just wrap it up on the discussion. What's your worst boxing movie you've ever seen?
Most of the ones that I've made it a point to watch are ones that I like looked into and wanted to see. Probably Snake Eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know some people might like that. I mean, it's kind of a thriller type thing. I don't know. I didn't care for that one that much. There's one, I can't remember the name of it, with Samuel L. Jackson. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Snakes on a Plane.
Rocky 4 and Rocky 5 are pretty bad.
Oh, Rocky 5 I agree with. I love
Rocky 4.
I fucking love Rocky 4. It's the best piece of Cold War propaganda that was ever
I know,
made.
right.
I want to.
It's just too entertaining. Is it a good movie?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, 12-year-old me loved it, but in retrospect, it's not that great.
When you ask that question, though, to be honest, I can't think of any that I just think of as just pure shit.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a testament to the genre.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's just got these themes that are just so ready-made to put forth. I just,
I also think you know what you're in for if you're going to see a boxing movie in terms of those themes.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're sought out. Like, you're not just gonna, this random boxing movie's on, I'm gonna watch it. Like, it's something you're gonna seek out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it may just be, too, what I intentionally sought out. I'm sure there are some stinkers out there that I just haven't seen, but,
Well, let's talk about our feature film that we've all agreed that we're going to discuss. Chelsea was kind enough to watch this week.
I did.
Talk about 1976's Rocky. The film was directed by John G. Avildsen.
I think it's Avildsen. I think I've heard it.
He's the director of Karate Kid 1, 2, and 3,
Oh, wow.
which is basically Rocky but karate.
Yes.
Yeah.
He
Right.
directed Lean on Me. He directed 8 Seconds.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and he directed the aforementioned Rocky 5.
Right.
So he went out with a
Holy
bang.
shit.
Oh, that's
he
okay.
really-
Rocky 5, I should have said that. That's the worst boxing movie ever.
Yeah.
Definitely that shit. I think I took that for granted when you asked me, but yeah.
Starring, of course, Sylvester Stallone, Talia Shire, Burt Young, Burgess Meredith in a fucking great role, and Carl Weathers. It garnered 3 Oscars, including Best Picture. Chelsea, I want to know what you think, because this is fresh on your mind.
It blows my mind that you have not seen this before. But
Hang on. Yeah, I've just never seen it. But I grew up in a household of women only, so like
that makes sense. Yeah.
this was not something that existed in our space. But God, and I'm still kind of, I didn't really have an opinion right after it was done. I was like, do I like this? Do I not like this? There were parts of it certainly I loved. I loved the love story. I thought that was so sweet. Oh my God. Him on TV, I know people make fun of it, but my God, it was the fucking cutest thing I've ever...
Adrian,
Oh my God.
I'm on TV.
Yeah.
Nobody but Stallone could have played that character.
They
And
wanted Reynolds.
no, it would have been incorrect.
Yep.
It would have become a big fucking joke, because there's
I think of Burt Reynolds as a Georgia, Florida kind of guy.
Yeah.
Stallone, you put him in that depressed Philadelphia backdrop, and he just meshes with the scenery.
He does, but he's not as harsh as other actors, especially of that time that you associate with it. There is such an innocence and a charm that he is conveying that I'm not entirely sure anybody else could. And I think he really fucked up with all these sequels, because I think the movie would be, I mean, it is pretty infamous, but don't, like, it's something that gets made fun of for a specific reason. And I think it would be probably more beloved without all these fucking hokey sequels.
Well, you jumped right ahead to one of my final questions.
Oh,
which
sorry.
Was, no, it's fine, because I'm glad to know that I wasn't off mark, which was, do the sequels harm the film's legacy?
100%. And I've never seen them.
Because Rocky 2 is I think is a great continuation of the story.
It's a good, actually a solid movie.
Yeah,
I
agree.
It this week.
Rocky 3 is a lot of fun, and it speaks to the excess of fame
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah.
Even Talia Shire falls into that trap
Right, and Rocky, you know, he loses his edge, right? He finds out later that they've been feeding him bums so that he wouldn't lose and that kind of thing. And so it takes Mick dying for him to kind of get revitalized. So, yeah. And then it's got a great fucking soundtrack, let's be honest.
I mean, like, it doesn't hurt the film in terms of, oh, these sequels make this one look bad. It just turns Rocky into a joke. As somebody who didn't grow up with it and just saw it, I knew who Rocky was. I've heard the references.
You had a preconceived notion of who Rocky was.
Well, but that's because that's what's presented to me, because it has been saturated. And, okay, there are good ones based on your guys' opinions, but there are ones that are so fucking bad that I know about them just because they're that fucking bad, and he becomes a joke so fast. And I think that's the thing that ruins it for me, because Rocky the character in that first one, my God, he really... Whew.
Rewatching this, I was struck by how little actual boxing is in this movie.
Right.
The bout is literally like the last 10, 15 minutes of the film.
Right.
And you've got
the opening with Spider Rico in the club.
And that's it. It's the rest is all drama.
Right.
It's training. It's his relationship with Adrian, with Burt Young's character, Paulie.
Yeah.
And Paulie's an interesting character because he kind of follows a redemption arc through the sequels, which is nice. Burgess Meredith, that scene, because he treated Rocky like shit. And then he tries to weasel his way into Rocky's good graces.
Weasel, so
go for it.
So one thing I love about this movie, and you're probably going to have to shut me up at some point, I think Sly's script for this was really intelligent, because he set a number of things up, but did so in a very subtle way that you only notice how he did it when you rewatch it. And probably Avildsen with direction probably deserves some credit for this too. But one of those ways is with the Mick character. So it does look like Mick is kind of weaseling his way back in, and he is in a way. But why does he do that? Is it just because he's greedy and wants money? He doesn't care about Rocky at all? I don't think so. They said it. There's some setup before that, right? So, and I won't go through all of them, but the biggest one is after Rocky loses his locker, right? Mick closes him out of his locker, puts him on what they call Skid Row, right? Which means you're a boxer who's going nowhere.
Yeah.
And Rocky says, essentially, why are you doing that? I mean, why are you doing this to me? And Mick says, you want to know how come? And they have a shouting match. And Mick says, because you had the talent to become a good fighter. And instead of that, you became a leg breaker for some 2-bit loan shark. That's an important scene for a couple reasons. One, it establishes that Mickey actually cared about Rocky but was frustrated by him, and that's why he's an asshole to him.
Yeah.
Second, in order to buy this movie, anybody that knows anything about elite athletics, you can't be a bum and get in there with the best and be competitive. So you've got to do something to convince the viewer that Rocky can get into the ring and hang with him and be competitive and potentially win. Mm-hmm. And so that's one way that's set up, right? It's not belabored, but Mick says, "Hey, I saw the talent in you years ago, and you wasted it." And so we get that little element. And so I think that, and yes, there is the weaseling in, so there's that complex character with Mick. But at the same time, though, you kind of see his where it came from.
You want to say something, Chelsea?
I just looked up the nominees for the Academy Award, the year Rocky won.
Okay.
How the fuck is Rocky gonna beat Taxi Driver?
It's a great movie. It's the same thing. Tears of Endearment beat Raging Bull. So if we're gonna go with boxing movies, I
just don't think Rocky was good enough to do that. And All the President's Men. I mean, those were great films.
Yeah.
I liked Rocky. Don't get me wrong. No.
Yeah.
No, I think it jerked off America, and I can see how they,
Well, I got 3 words for you: Shakespeare in Love.
And also, I have 1 word for you: how the fuck did Amadeus win?
So yeah, I mean, it's funny the Academy Award.
I mean, you have these movies that pop up like Citizen Kane lost to How Green Is My Valley, but usually though those movies they lost to actually were good movies.
Yeah.
I just mean
Terms of Endearment's a good movie, but it's not as good as Raging Bull.
Yeah.
I just mean in terms of if we're comparing it to the movies of the time.
Yeah.
and I'm really struggling to figure out like where I sit with Rocky. It was good, not that good.
And that it always surprises me that Rocky won Best Picture because it's a crowd pleaser. And,
well, exactly.
And
Jerked off America.
It's rare that a crowd pleaser can win. Quite
They
frankly.
do that occasionally, though.
Yeah.
They did that shit with Crash.
Yeah.
When it beat Brokeback Mountain.
Oh, yeah.
That's not. It's more defensible with Rocky, I would say.
Oh yeah, I can see how it did one, like 100%.
So, tell me what you think in terms of how do you think Rocky has aged? The film itself.
So I have and had a lot of questions about Rocky. One thing that really bothered me, and I'm not entirely sure if this is intentional and if I'm opening up a can of worms, but the guy he was fighting, I can't remember his name.
Apollo Creed.
There we go. I'm wondering if it was intentionally cast as a black man. And I have a lot of fucking issues with that.
Well, it almost certainly was. The Apollo Creed character, I don't think anyone would deny was modeled off of Muhammad Ali.
Right.
That's what I was wondering.
I mean, there's no question. And the Rocky character himself was modeled after a Ali opponent, Chuck Wepner, who fought Ali and he didn't go the distance. So remember in Rocky, the big thing is he doesn't beat Apollo, he goes the distance. Wepner almost went the distance with Ali, but not quite. He did get knocked out in the last minute of the fight. But in any case, that was a big upset that he even went that far. And that's what Sylvester Stallone has said in interviews since then. He based the fight off of that Wepner character. And then, of course, the Apollo character is modeled after Ali. And that, you could definitely say there's some problematic things about that.
Well, and as somebody who is not a boxing fan and just watching this at face value, and I'm putting it in context of the time, too. You have this commercial black man who beats this down-on-his-luck white man, but also at the same time, somebody who is, God, dressed in all of this Americana fucking bullshit garb. Like, I really have a fucking issue with that. Like, I didn't like that. That really kind of made me sick to my stomach, really pissed me off. I wish I could talk to them about this.
Okay. Well, I think I mentioned to you, in 76, it was the bicentennial year. And I remember as a kid, it was everywhere.
I understand that. But now having the wisdom of that time outside of that, come on.
I think that I think it was a great, not great, it was an opportunity for them to point out the commercialism of fame and that sort of thing. He was a caricature. I think that the people around him were depicted much more sinister than he was.
No, and I'm not blaming him, but and all of those characters were also black. Mm-hmm. Most of them were black.
That's an interesting point.
And I think there's a fucking racial thing here that is just being fucking disregarded because the themes of boxing jerk off America.
Well, there's definitely in boxing the Great White Hope element. So the Great White Hope element is a sort of kind of sinister thing that permeates through, particularly in heavyweight boxing, where the last, up until recently, the last white heavyweight champion was Rocky Marciano in the 50s. After that, all the champions were black. And so there was this concept of, we got to have the Great White Hope, that white guy who's going to take the title back. And Rocky does not ever explicitly tap into that, of course, but you could certainly say that as a flaw in the movie that it's present, right?
Right.
And I think it's not for, like, I hate this word, but it's not for, like, woke reasons. They're not trying to shine a spotlight on it. It feels really gross to me, and it feels very intentional.
Well, and let's remember, too, that Ali, historically, is a beloved figure now. That was not always the case.
Right.
In the mid-'70s, he had, some people thought of him as a deserter because he refused to go to Vietnam. He was flamboyant in an era when you were supposed to be a reserved and that kind of thing as a fighter, particularly as a black fighter, but that brings up a whole host of things.
Well,
with
of course, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with it, because I think he became a poster child for white people to hate, honestly. And that's what this feels like.
Interesting.
I don't like it. Like, that really pissed me off.
That element is, I think, problematic, because I do think that there is that. I don't think it was intentionally done by anybody.
I do.
Maybe it was. I don't know. But in any case, either way, though, it's certainly there, and something that's certainly worth mentioning, because the Ali character is cast as the villain against the white guy.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest reason for me to kind of figure out how I feel about Rocky, because I really have a fucking issue with that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Tangent. Done.
No, it's fine. It's very well worth. That's why I asked. How is it aged? The only other thing that I thought of, and it kind of for a second there, when he gets Adrian to go up to his room.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't
was
like
gonna
that
mention
scene.
that.
I don't like that scene either.
He kind of backs her in the corner, and for a second, I'm holding my breath, like going, "Oh my god, is this going to be a cringy, rapey scene?" And because I don't remember it that way, and it's like it's a tense moment for a modern audience to watch. But I think
I don't think it's even for a modern audience. When I was a kid and watching it,
it was tense then.
I would fast. Because as I've told y'all coming into this, I watched this movie hundreds of times, probably, or dozens at least. I would always fast forward through that movie. And maybe when you're 6 or 7, you could just say you don't want to see the adults making out or whatever. But it's just an uncomfortable feeling that you get every time you see it.
Well, he's physically imposing, and she's meek, and
Well, but she's also made it clear she's not meek. She stood up. No, I don't want to. I don't think it's appropriate.
Physically.
I mean, I understand that. I think the intent is that Rocky's breaking her walls down. I think that's what they're going for, but. It's definitely not. It's definitely a problematic scene. Probably the scene that definitely has aged the worst. But I don't think that it was. I mean, like I said, I felt uncomfortable with that scene 30 years ago.
Good point.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's a weird scene. And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, at the end of Rocky and Adrian's first date, they end up in Rocky's shitty apartment, and so he's trying to put the moves on her. She's very shy, her character, and she's trying to leave initially. But Rocky, though, the way they're trying to portray it is that she really wants to stay because she likes Rocky, but she's just shy, she's reserved, and Rocky's breaking those walls down, but it doesn't necessarily come off that way.
Yeah, it doesn't come off that way.
Because she's not shy. She was vocal from the get-go, and that's I guess at the core of it. That's my problem with boxing movies, because here you have a woman who is not loud. I'm loud. Sorry, not sorry.
What?
Oh, I know, right? Who is speaking her mind, and people are just fucking choosing not to listen because, oh my God, she wears glasses, but my God, at the end they take them off and she's this hot thing. But somebody who is told she's ugly, she's never going to have a man, she has to live with her brother, all of this stupid shit, when she's saying everything that we're saying right now, we just chose not to listen to her.
Yeah, she was definitely not heard
at all.
I mean, fucking Polly was the fucking turkey thing.
Yeah,
he grabs the turkey and tosses it so they'll go out.
Even that, like, oh, I did you this favor by bringing this man here.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
Now, to be fair, that the difference though with that scene though is I think the movie is critical of what the men are doing to her and that, or what Polly's doing to her. And that scene
I think it came across as a joke. We
no,
were supposed to laugh.
I think it read that Polly was a shit. Polly was a shit in the first film. And so was
Rocky in that scene.
Well, I did notice this time when I watched it, Rocky just kind of sits in the background and doesn't jump up and
then goes up to the door, has that cute little speech when she's made it fucking clear at this point. Yeah. So anyways,
that to me was the part that was kind of disrespectful to the female character.
Much like most boxing movies.
But see, it just goes back to what Mick said. Women weaken legs.
That's true. That's true. And just remember that. Words to live by.
Sorry. I'm trying to yell for the women in the boxing movies.
All right, last question. In your scope of boxing films, where does Rocky fall?
Probably 2 behind Raging Bull for me.
2 behind Raging Bull.
Yeah, okay. I think I got to go Raging Bull 1, Rocky 2 for boxing movies. Okay. Yeah. sentimentally, Rocky's going number one, but Raging Bull is just objectively such an expertly crafted film. It also doesn't go for the easy, the easy crowd pleasing moments at all. Like the opposite of that. In fact, you have an anti-hero that you have to get the crowd to follow. Nevertheless,
I put Rocky about number 4 for me.
Yeah,
I've got Raging Bull, the setup, The Harder They Fall ahead of it.
No problem. I had no issue with that. And I didn't get into this much on the podcast, and I won't go into it too much here. But Rocky's sort of in my cinematic DNA because it was one of the handful of VHS tapes I had in the late '80s when I had 3 channels to watch on TV. And so when you had those handful of VHS tapes, you were watching them over and over and over.
And that's not something that happens now.
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
kids don't get that.
Yeah.
No.
And so that movie, when I rewatched it this week, I could anticipate every facial expression, line. Friends and I have joked over the years that know me well, Joey Poole and others, about how I can quote lines randomly from this movie. But The Harder They Fall, the setup too, I have no issue with anybody putting that above Rocky.
Chelsea?
For me, because I have not seen those ones that go above, and I do want to see them just based on your guys' conversations and hearing about them prior to Rocky number 1.
Yay!
Out of all of the boxing movies I've seen, and I mean, I say I've not seen many. I probably have.
You've seen Cinderella Man.
Yes. $1 Million Baby. Like, I've seen those things. The Fighter. Many more that I could probably list off that really don't mean fucking shit in the scheme of things. But Rocky is one of those. And fucking A, I got pretty passionate here about a couple of things. Yeah. But at the same time, Rocky as a character, I love.
It stirs you up. I mean, that's the cool thing about Rocky is, like, by the end of the movie, you're if you're not feeling something, I would be really surprised.
For me, it kind of pisses me off that the thing within the culture, and I do think it's because of the sequels, is, yo, Adrian, I'm on TV. Like, that's bullshit. It's cute and it's funny and I love it, but no.
All right. That's boxing movies, everybody. We want to thank Todd for being on the show and bringing your knowledge, bringing your love.
Yes.
I thank you so much. I hope my enthusiasm came through.
Do you have anything that you want to plug?
Nothing that I want to plug per se. However, there is a movie out. If you're familiar with the movie Old Boy, are y'all familiar with this?
I know Old Boy.
So that director, Park Chan-wook, has a new movie out called Decision to Leave. It's streaming on Mubi, which you have to subscribe to, but you can get a week's free trial that is totally worth it for this movie. It's an excellent movie. I just watched it the other day. Just wanted to recommend that to people.
Nice.
If you like foreign cinema and don't mind reading subtitles and all that, it's really good.
Chelsea?
I have 2 things I want to plug. Go. First, Adrian's voice. I will be it.
You'll be
I'll be her
advocate.
Voice.
You're her advocate. Yes.
God. Second thing, fucking theme weeks. Like, just give in to them and do them. Fucking A.
Wow. And I'm going to plug the podcast. This is going to be our last episode for December, the only episode for December. We've got very busy times ahead of us, but we're going to come back with our top 22 of 22.
Oh, can't wait.
I think Travis Cito will be back with us to discuss his top 22, and we'll argue over it, and we'll make fun of him for some of his 5-star ratings on Letterboxd.
I noticed some of those that I'm curious about.
Some head scratchers. So, so like all family members over the holidays, there will be arguments had,
and I will win.
So we want to invite you back and come check that out. We're probably going to record that New Year's weekend-ish, somewhere around there, and drop it hopefully at the beginning of the year. And please, check us out on social media. We're at Cinema Chop Shop on everything except for YouTube. We are Cinema Chop Shop Podcast there. And please tell your friends about us. Like and subscribe to the podcast, rate and review. Please stick with us, and we're going to have a fun time in 2023. And until then, we invite you to please watch, chop, retrofit.